And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking the United States Grand Prix fallout. Yes, funnily enough, there is more fallout from Lando Norris versus Max Verstappen. But once again, congratulations to Ferrari, congratulations to Charles Leclerc, congratulations to the first Ferrari 1-2 in almost 20 years. 2006, in fact, at the United States Grand Prix, with none other than a certain Michael Schumacher and a wannabe 2008 champion, let's say, Felipe Massa. See you at the other side of this. So welcome to the Formula One fallout. That is the United States Grand Prix. And as you can see, this is the teams standing, the Constructors Championship, which, as kind of predictable, McLaren are leading. But the gap has closed. No, the gap to Red Bull, not particularly, but the gap to Ferrari, with that Ferrari 1-2, scoring massive amounts of points compared to McLaren. And Red Bull still on 504. There is a very good chance that Ferrari may well skip ahead of Red Bull at the next race in Mexico. And if I was McLaren, I'd be most certainly looking behind at the Scarlet cars rather than those Red Bulls, simply because Ferrari, have they turned a corner? It's going to be interesting, isn't it? They had the best race pace in America, better than Max Verstappen. We all thought after the sprint race, Max has probably got this in the bag if you can get past Lando Norris at turn 1, and that is exactly what he did. You know, that's exactly what he did. What he didn't realise is, well, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc steaming through, doing what Lando Norris did in the sprint race, except this time taking the lead, and he never looked back. Now, this is the Drivers' Championship. Max Verstappen extending his lead over Lando Norris, both in the sprint race and in the actual race itself. And it's Leclerc who's now getting close to Lando Norris for that second place. Piastri is in 4th. Disappointing weekend for Oscar Piastri. Carlos Sainz in 5th. Hamilton in 6th on 177. George Russell closing in just 10 points. This is, as I said in the quick race review yesterday, this is by far the worst Lewis Hamilton weekend I think I can almost ever, really, in terms of it. It was just absolutely shocking. And there, we look all the way down, Sergio Perez, but stuck record. But if we look all the way down in 10th, in the top 10, Nico Hülkenberg. Is he the MVP of the year? I don't know. So let's get into what the FIA said about Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. We kind of, we did speak about this, but we skipped the official ruling. I don't think it had come out maybe at the time that we recorded the video, but the stewards have received the race book from the race director, and here was it. The decision was a 5-second penalty. Car 4 left the track at turn 12, gaining a lasting advantage. Yes, he did. That's a fact. So the stewards reviewed positioning and marshalling system data, video, in-car video evidence. Car 4, that's Lando Norris, was overtaking Car 1, Max Verstappen, on the outside. But, and this is what they're saying, but was not level with Car 1 at the apex. Therefore, under the driving standard guidelines, Car 4 had lost the right to the corner. Accordingly, as Car 4 left the track and returned in front of Car 1, it is deemed to be a case of leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. A 5-second penalty is imposed instead of a 10-second penalty, recommended in the guidelines because, having committed in the overtaking move on the outside, the driver of Car 4, Lando Norris, had... And this is the bit that gets me crazy. So 5-second penalty imposed on Lando Norris because he overtook off the track. He was forced off the track by Max Verstappen, in my opinion. But so they gave him a 5-second instead of a 10-second. Because having committed to the overtaking move on the outside, the driver of Car 4, aka Lando Norris, had little alternative than to leave the track because of the proximity of Car 1, which also left the track. But they gave him a 5-second penalty. What on earth? They're admitting that he got pushed off the track. Something that George Russell did to Bottas, and he got a 5-second penalty. In view of the above, we determine that this will not count as a track limit strike for car fault. Oh, how kind, Steward. And competitors are reminded that they have the right to appeal. Yeah, but it needs new data. Pointless for McLaren to appeal. I don't think they're going to get anything with these consistently inconsistent stewarding decisions. I mean, the bigger loss is for F1 and the F1 fans. Obviously, there's two sides to the story. We've nailed, I've pretty much, no splinters here, and nailed our post, so to speak, on the fact that Lando Norris should not have really received a 5-second penalty. And if he was to, well, Max should have received one earlier in the race. There was a couple of times as well. The whole him and Carlos Sainz, both of them going off the track. The fact that Max Verstappen pushed Lando Norris off the track in turn 1 at the start of the race. Pray tell, what do you mean? Well, I'll show you exactly what I mean. And let's have a look then. Let's have a quick look then at that turn 1, shall we? Here we go. Turn 1, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris should not have left the door open, if you saw this yesterday. But here's the significant thing in turn 1. Once again, as you can see here, Lando being pushed off the track. And there, I mean, there's kind of like the proof. There's the proof there at the bottom. So Lando Norris, as you can see there, leaving the door absolutely wide open. And as you can see here, he just gets pushed off the track. As I'm scrolling down again, now it's actually working. Lando Norris pushed off the track by Max Verstappen. Now, everyone says, oh, but it's turn 1. It's the first lap of the race. I kind of understand that. When you've got loads of cars and loads of things happening. But it's just these two. It is just these two. It is just these two. Have I made myself clear yet? It is just these two. It is just these two. These two. Not, it's not science. Pushing him off, but clearly no penalty. Absolutely zero penalty there. Not particularly great, is it? And it's kind of a bit sad. Now, you can, no penalty. You can attribute that to what would be the equivalent of that. Using that excuse, I think, for lap 1, yes, I know they are a bit lenient. But when it's something as obvious as that, you don't need to be lenient. The equivalent is basically, in football, the first 2 minutes, the whistle blows, you grab the ball with both your hands and throw it in the goal. Yeah, obviously a handball, but that's like the ref going, it's just the first 2 minutes of football. Doesn't count. No, obviously it does. And so does this. Inconsistent stewarding decisions all the way around, in my opinion. In fact, we have exclusive footage. Here's Max Verstappen passing, this is Max Verstappen passing Lando Norris this time. And as you can see, Max dive bombs, but importantly, he's now got the apex. He has now got the apex, even though he goes off the track. It wasn't fast enough. Max Verstappen ahead of Lando, gets ahead of Lando Norris. Here's a different view as well, from Max Verstappen on the inside of Lando Norris. He's ahead of the apex, isn't he? So absolutely, he should have that corner, even though he pushes him off the corner. He's ahead of the apex, very much so. Is Max Verstappen ahead at the apex? Poor Lando. Well done, Max. You gain that position. I mean, how ridiculous do the stewards really want to be? And it's these silly rules, rather than Lando and Max, that are the biggest travesty of the sport right now, including the consistently inconsistent stewarding, which, let's be fair, absolutely, in our opinion, need to go. So Autosport do have an interesting take on this, and we're going to read it here. Why Verstappen's late Austin clash with penalised Norris is a Brazil 2021 repeat. So as we know, he clashed twice with Max Verstappen clashed twice with Formula 1 rival Lando Norris in Austin, with the latter controversially penalised for passing Red Bull off the track. We all know about that. There's part of the picture. Whoops a daisy. And if you want to understand how brilliant genius even Max is, I don't think he's brilliant. I just think he's an amazing driver. Just can't race very well in terms of wheel-to-wheel battles. That's braking late and pushing a car off the track to get past or keep the position which he has. It's not racing. Watch exactly how he attacked Lando Norris at the start and then defended against him. So the latest saga frustratingly eclipsed by the brilliant victory of Charles Leclerc. And we're not talking about that, and we should be. How awesome that Ferrari turnaround is to have a 1-2. But the problem boils down to both turn 1 and turn 12. Verstappen v Norris battles were essentially the same cynical tactic from the world champion. Here rises the spectre, they say, of the 2021 campaign of campaigns, where Verstappen and his Red Bull fought against the 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. So bitterly, it says, given the tit-for-tat squabbling over Mini DRS and Bibgate, McLaren and Red Bull respectively in the last 2 races, plus this being another season with multiple controversial clashes with title protagonists. Specifically there, it's the Brazil 2021 race that really matters, and how heading into Interlagos Turn 4 with Hamilton and his fresh engine grunt bearing down in arguably the Britain's greatest ever F1 win. It is amazing, one of the best Formula 1 races, I think, ever. It's up there in the top 10 of F1 races won. Verstappen steamed on the inside. He'd taken in defence. Both flew on the runoff and the Red Bull remained ahead. As with Interlagos, Verstappen's onboard feed at Austin was critically also broadcasting backwards. Something to bear in mind when remembering how rapidly the steward made this call. And so that's something the FIA sources insisted to Autosport post-race is in line with what the teams have been pushing for. They said there are differences in relation to Brazil 2021, and he said, but they matter. For Norris at Austin 3 years later, it's how he did overtake off track, but McLaren didn't order him to give the place back. When this writer asked him why not on Sunday, team principal Andrea Stella explained, on the pit wall under my responsibility, there was a complete agreement by all people involved that in this interpretation the situation did not need to be investigated. And he said, if anything, we thought the investigation should be for Max for pushing Lando off the track. Yeah. That's what we thought was going to happen when we saw the case was under investigation. So for us, no need to give back the position. For me, that absolutely makes sense at the time. For Hamilton in the Interlagos class, he was able to pass at the same spot a short while later anyway and went on to win. Verstappen wasn't even investigated in that case. And herein, doing what the 2021 Mercedes couldn't in a different runoff, Norris was penalised 5 seconds. I also asked Stella, after he stated the defending car goes straight at the apex for Verstappen at Austin in turn 12, if this was Brazil 2021 all over again. And he said that was extreme because of the speed of which Max missed the apex in Brazil. If you turned into Max, it was a big crash at the time. This one, it was much slower speed, so it could be more of a benign situation, said Stella. But it's just the fact that you defend by going off the track. That cannot be permissible. And that's the issue. Had Max Verstappen stayed on the track, yes, he would have forced Lando Norris off. But I think had Lando Norris got past Max, it still would have been controversial. But maybe Lando Norris would have deserved being penalised. I don't know. But he still didn't give Lando Norris space. But in this case, like Brazil, but they're saying a less extreme example of Brazil 2021, Lando Norris was pushed off the track by Max Verstappen, who in turn missed the apex so much, outbraked himself so much, or was so wise and competent that he purposely pushed Lando off the track. Either of those scenarios is still not good for Max Verstappen, is it really? But the Brazil point remains pertinent. After a little digging away from the dictaphones, it became clear that although the speed specifics of Turn 4 Brazil, Turn 12 Austin are different, McLaren insiders are convinced that Verstappen's manoeuvre here is of the same class in Brazil 2021. Class is the key word, because Verstappen is so good it's clear that after he raced Leclerc cleanly in the early 2022 contest, a hiatus then ensued during the time that he didn't have any opposition in 2023, and in that time he perfected essentially the same tactic. It now conforms to F1's current racing rules, and that is the huge problem. Obviously, they're saying Verstappen has shown again that he's willing to be completely ruthless to win. In this case, extending his points lead, and to a certain extent, that has to be respected, applauded by some, no doubt. But it's the cynicism of what's happening repeatedly now that sours the taste of what was otherwise a brilliant F1 race. Amen. The main dispute is how F1's driving standard guidelines, a copy which Autosport has seen, just doesn't cover what he's doing, and that is turning defence into attack. A la Brazil 2021. The point where cunning eases into crafty into basically a giant runoff area. And that one, I completely agree. When it comes to Norris's penalty, the latter states to be entitled to be given room, including at the exit. The outside attacking car must have its front axle at least alongside at the apex to the exit. Norris complies in this case, albeit quite wide until he runs off track. An outside attacking car must also be driven safely and controlled throughout such a move. No problem there for Norris, Autosport are saying, and it must be able to make the corner with the track limits in these cases. Yes, he does that. Here the GPS trace becomes critical. Looking at the lap in question and the tour before, Norris brakes at the same point each time and made the corner. Obviously the first time where Verstappen had jinxed slightly less left than he soon should, they're saying. The only car that braked later in all 4 points for Verstappen's in the clash that had them both off the road. He braked later on purpose to push Lando wide, knowing that he's not going to make the corner, but he did make the apex. Norris was penalised because he did overtake off the track, that it was deemed to be a case of leaving the track and gaining an advantage. In the relevant FIA bulletin, the stewards noted that he was also not level with car 1 at the apex. Okay. That's what the stewards noted. But in adding, car 4 had little... Oh, this is the thing that just cracks me up. They added that car 4 had little alternative other than to leave the track because of the proximity of car 1. So they basically said Lando Norris had to leave the track because Max Verstappen pushed him off the track. And he'd also left the track himself to explain why Norris was only given a 5-second penalty. Ridiculous. What happened was either the fair outcome or Verstappen should have been penalised, but Verstappen wasn't, despite Stella saying McLaren was so convinced he would do it. Told Oscar Piastri. We'll get into what Oscar says in a bit. In his defence, echoed by team boss Christian Horner. Well, he's going to defend Max. That's his driver. But it's Christian Horner. Same guy that said they didn't breach the cost cap when they did in 2022. He said Verstappen only deflected in the post-race press conference, saying it's very clear in the rules. Outside the white line, you cannot pass. I've done it before as well in the past, he added, referring to the 2017 US GP here. Yeah, okay. That was a bit different though, wasn't it? There were sub-issues at play when assessing every investigated clash. The stewards have the power to be discretionary, and the guidelines are exactly that. They are not binding. Post-race, George Russell also called for the same steward all year long. Another long-standing problem with F1 rules, and Russell matters here because he was penalised for a very similar incident with Sauber's Valtteri Bottas, which we know at the same spot 39 lap earlier. The key difference for Russell was clearly attacking. By the letter of the law, my penalty was correct, the Briton explained. The guidelines for overtaking on the outside, so he's basically admitting it. So I don't think Max Verstappen is really a genius. In that, I just don't think he can race very well. I'm so sorry for Verstappen fans. I think he is an amazing driver. I think you can justify one of the top 10 greatest of all time. Absolutely. I think I'd have difficulty arguing. But wheel-to-wheel racer? No. There's better people. This is race fans. If I can actually get this horrible advert away. They put what the stewards should have written to justify the unpopular Norris decision, which I thought was interesting. And so, what do they say the stewards should have? The stewards' decision showed McLaren correctly identified the key issue at stake, whether Norris had been at the apex. However, they ruled Norris was not level with car 1. The footage of the incident corroborates this, is what they're saying. It's pretty much what we've been saying all the time as well. We think we were ahead at the apex. McLaren's thinking about the facts of the situation. Drivers aren't allowed to overtake on the outside of the track. Yes. That is very true. The steward decision shows them grappling with its implications and vainly trying to avoid contradicting themselves, but they do. Given that it's impossible to understand the steward logic in considering it's acceptable for a driver defending their position who's fallen behind a rival that they are allowed to run both cars off the track. I mean, there lies the issue. Both cars off the track. It's abhorrent, isn't it? Norris has come out and said the stewards are rushing decisions without driver input, and it's wrong. I mean, for this, bear in mind, there is a podium, and no one wants the results after the race. That I completely get. But I feel that there are some instances when maybe we need to be a bit patient. And Norris felt that the United States Grand Prix stewards were rushing to make a decision on his off-track pass on F1 title rival Max Verstappen, stating the outcome was guessing without driver input. As we know, he was handed a 5-second penalty, ensuring Max Verstappen getting that podium. He said, I think there's, again, inconsistency, but it's tough for me. It's just a rush decision, and they don't hear or understand our points, which they should do after the race. They just want to make a decision at the time so you don't alter points, but therefore it's a rush decision, and they don't hear my point of discussion or my team's point or Max's point, he says, to be fair. Quite level-headed there. Oscar Piastri is also weighed on the FIA inconsistency criticism with the he believes the F1 driver guidelines need clarifying after this incident. And what did Oscar Piastri said? He said, I've seen it briefly. I mean, it's not really that much for me to comment on. The only thing, he said, I would say is that both cars went off the track. So I feel like it's a bit difficult to give a penalty for both guys going off the track. I don't know what happened at turn 1 either. It looked pretty dicey. Yes, it did. Max Verstappen push Lando Norris off the track, but no penalty. 100% not Lewis's fault. Now, we're finally getting a tiny bit away from the Norris-Verstappen incident. We've spoken briefly about how wonderful Charles Leclerc was. We can't really say that much. We hardly saw him during the race. He just pulled away. Amazing. Yes, Carlos Sainz was sort of catching him at the end, but I can't help but feel that the brilliance of Charles Leclerc had it all underhand. Now, in relation to Lewis going off at turn 2, having the worst weekend, I think, potentially of his career, he said, I was really caught by surprise by this bouncing, but I hadn't. Obviously, I'm devastated, said Lewis Hamilton, after what was an uncharacteristic lap 2. Toto Wolff said Mercedes to look into why the upgraded car caused driver issues. If you remember, the same corner George Russell went off in qualifying in Q3 for his run. He apologised. Lewis Hamilton apologised for their whoops at Mercedes, and he even said, "I wasn't even pushing at that point. The car just started bouncing." And Bono said, "I just got a 40 kp tailwind, but the left wheel was bouncing up in the air and lost the back end." When, if you looked at it, it was just kind of like a really pathetic like off. The same happened to George Russell. And when Toto Wolff was interviewed about it, he basically said, "Nah, that's the car. That's not Lewis. That's not a 7-time world champion." Now, Toto Wolff was also in the news. He's come out and labelled Red Bull's bib device outrageous and laughs at the Bugs Bunny tool. Mercedes boss has slammed, and this was at the beginning of the weekend, with Red Bull's adjustable bib. That's the front part of the floor, not the whole floor, and in the cockpit. There's a device, apparently, that needs to be used by a mechanic, for example, that can lift it up and down. The theory is you could, in theory, use that between qualifying and the race, which Red Bull vehemently deny, and there's no evidence that they've done that. But I digress. The bib adjustment device, as outrageous as he suggested, the FIA should look further into the matter. They were at the centre of all this intrigue Red Bull were at the beginning of the beginning of the race weekend, as Max Verstappen and Red Bull are now at the end with that penalty or something completely different. While the presence of the device, which has to be adjusted by the tool, is allowed, what would be against the regulations would be for it to be changed under those parc fermé conditions. And the FIA, the single-seater, the head of FIA single-seater, Nicholas Tobias, said there is no indication that Red Bull used the device. Wolff, whose team has battled Red Bull hard in the past, thinks the situation is far from acceptable. And he said, speaking about the Red Bull system, he said, "My view is, from the distance of what I've seen and what I've heard, it's outrageous." Explaining more about why he felt that way, Wolff said that it is highly suspicious for Red Bull to have fitted such a complicated device to its car, simply to help change ride heights and practice sessions. "I think we're all designing parts that are F1 standard," he said, "and that are to the highest specifications that are within the regulations." He went on to say, "Sometimes things like aeroelasticity, you would probably try and go as far as you can, but there's other things overall in certain parts where you would question why they exist." And he added, "Why would you design such a thing and put 2 marks on it for 2 positions like you want to change this? Is this precise decision making in F1? And Wolff suggested that Red Bull pulled off a charade in showing to the FIA a tool that it said it was used to alter the device. Yet it did look a lot more complicated than a lot of the other experts suggested it was. He said, "I really like that when they put this real broom in the car to demonstrate that this is the only way that it can get changed. I wonder how long it took them to make this up and to stick it in there." One rival team has nicknamed the 2-foot-long socket that Red Bull showed as the FIA a Bugs Bunny device, because it seems such a cartoon tool considering the sophistication levels normally expected in F1. And Wolff backed the idea. "I didn't know that in F1 we were using such Bugs Bunny devices. It's not good enough to say that this is it, and we promise that we are not going to do it again." And while Tobias said over the United States Grand Prix weekend that he believed the matter was closed, Wolff doesn't think so. He said, "I cannot speak for the FIA at all. I cannot speak for Nicholas. Obviously, that's something that's been not spotted for a long time. But I think the leadership of the FIA is going to look at that and say, what are we doing with this?" Yeah, interesting. I'd like to leave you with this last bit here, which made me chuckle. It's a bit of humour, not really meant to be too serious. If you no longer go for a gap, you are no longer racing. Or if you're Max Verstappen, if your opponent goes for a gap, run him off the road. Yeah, savage. Tongue in cheek. Up until then, though, I mean, Max Verstappen, what defending? I mean, absolutely class. I know I've mentioned he can't race wheel to wheel, and I still think he's not, he has issues at racing wheel to wheel. But in terms of defensive driving, that was the best I've seen of Max Verstappen in relation to defending what was a much faster car, maybe by about 3 or 4 tenths a second, but still, I haven't seen that good defending since Bahrain 2014, the duel in the desert. And even then, to be fair to Lewis Hamilton, he was very near the mark, and I think sometimes over the mark in the way he treated Nico Rosberg as well. Should he have got a penalty? Well, maybe if that was race today, as amazing as that race was and amazing as Lewis was, because Nico Rosberg was on much faster tyres at some points during that race than Lewis Hamilton. That was amazing too, but a masterclass from Max in defending, obviously until that turn when it all went slightly controversial. So, if you liked what you saw, please give us a subscribe. If you are subscribed, hit that notification button so you do not miss a video. If you give us a like and a subscribe, you're a multiple world champion in our eyes. If you just do one of them, hey, you're still a world champion. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the United States Grand Prix. The weekend, we're going into Mexico. We're going to have the preview probably tomorrow or Wednesday. As in Tuesday or Wednesday. At the time of recording, it's Monday the 21st of October. We will no doubt speak to you soon. Thank you very much.